Yep. Ooh.
Hello there, everybody, and welcome to this afternoon's, this morning's webinar from the Curious Piano Teachers. My name is Sally Cathcart, and I'm delighted to welcome you here. And thank you for coming to join us tonight. And I'm going to be handing over in a little bit to Dr. Julie Nair and to Catherine Fisher, who are sitting there over in America. So hello, both of you.
Hello. Hello.
And if you haven't heard them before, well, you've got a treat in store. So welcome to all of you. If you haven't been to one of our webinars before, let me just give you a quick guided tour. You've got a little chat box. So we'd love those of you that are here and you've already started. I'm too late. You're just introducing yourself. Fantastic. We've got literally hundreds of people have registered for this. So it's very exciting. I'm just going to read out a few names. There's some that we know here. Hi, Elizabeth. Lovely to see you. We've got Elaine, who's in Washington, and we've got Juan from Madrid, and Laura from Dallas, and Darlene, Carol from Pennsylvania, Kim from, I think that says Milwaukee, and Val's there from Belfast. Oh, we've got Sladana, I hope that's I say that, from Serbia. I think that's the first person I've recognized as being from Serbia. Oh, lots of people from Canada, South California. I'm sorry, I can't say your names. Oh, they're just flooding in. Too fast for me. We've got Jody from Maine, Joan from Columbus, and Sarah Jane from Fermanagh, and Jonathan, who enjoyed meeting us at the MTNA. We were just talking about the MTNA conference a moment ago, Jonathan, and saying how it took several weeks to recover from that, really. Tammy from Seattle. It's fantastic. So many of you are here. Now, I'm really sorry to be able to say that Sharon, my co-partner of the Curious Piano Teachers, isn't able to join us tonight. Her little boy, you might know she's got a little boy who's, I think, coming up for 12 weeks old now, and Ruel is keeping her a little busy this week. So she really sent her apologies, and she's not able to come and join us tonight. But she's here in spirit, even if she isn't quite here in purpose. But I have got a helper, and on the other end is Angie. So Angie, would you like to say hello to everybody?
Hello, everybody. Hello to everyone we met in MTNA as well.
Yes, Angie was with me at the MTNA conference too, and she might be popping in. You might hear her voice now and again when there are questions and things. So in a moment, I'm going to be handing over, as I said, to Julie and Catherine, and I know they've got an absolutely fascinating presentation to give you. They did it actually at the MTNA conference, and for those of us that were still there on the last morning, because it was about the last presentation of the whole conference, it was absolutely fascinating. And I said, oh, you've got to come and do this for us on a webinar. Teaching playing by rote is a really important subject, and I think what I loved about their presentation that you're going to get from it is the way that they've broken it down, and you can really begin to understand rote teaching and learning in a much deeper way. So that word rote has many connotations. But I'm going to just hand over to them. I'll be back again at the end. And if you've got any questions, do keep them coming in the chat box. And we'll either come back to those towards the end of the webinar, or we'll pick up a few as we go. We'll see how it goes. So welcome to everybody. I'm going to hand over to Julie and Catherine, and see you at the end.
Hello, everyone. We're so glad to be here with you. I'm going to go ahead and screen share to turn the PowerPoint on. So we're so happy to be here with you again and to talk about the subject of rote teaching. The title of our presentation is Rote is Not a Four-Letter Word. I don't know if that translates the same to the UK, but in the four-letter word, sort of like a swear word, we know that rote can be a controversial topic. So we're just so happy to share with you today some of our ideas about rote teaching. So the word rote, as I said, has a controversial reputation in the piano teaching world, as I'm sure many of you have noticed. And traditionally, it has become a four-letter word, big no-no, don't teach by rote. We believe that this has come about for two reasons. First is Noah Webster. Now, Noah Webster wrote one of the first dictionaries in the US, and I actually live only about 8 miles from his house in Connecticut, so I could go visit him. I read a biography about him, and it was so enjoyable because he really likes organization and lists, just like me. I'm very type A when it comes to lists. Unfortunately, his definition of the word rote in his dictionary are the use of memory, usually with little intelligence, and mechanical and unthinking routine or repetition. No wonder no one likes the word rote. This is certainly not what we want our piano students to be like.
We believe that rote has become a four-letter word in the piano teaching world because of these definitions, and also because we have probably all come across transfer students who have poor sight reading skills, and then you come to find out they were taught by rote. But let's really think deeply about what we mean by rote teaching at the piano and whether or not the word rote really deserves its four-letter word status. Here are 4 questions that can get our thinking started on this topic. What do we mean by rote teaching at the piano? Is poor reading the direct result of teaching by rote? Why is it assumed that we have to teach only by reading or only by rote? And finally, are there any benefits of rote teaching? So question number 1, what do we mean by rote teaching at the piano? The definition we use is the systematic introduction of musical and artistic concepts that are best introduced by modeling rather than from the notated score. Music is an oral art and thus transcends notation. And as Francis Clark said, sound before symbol. Rote teaching is a way to help students experience a concept in sound and technical feel before they are introduced to it in notation.
I used to be very anti-rote teaching. Because I have always been a good sight reader, my teaching used to emphasize reading 100%. It was not until my dissertation research that I started to rethink how I was teaching. Although my research was directed toward elementary level technique, observing and interviewing well-respected teachers changed many aspects of my teaching. Many of the teachers I interviewed incorporated some rote teaching into their lessons, and I saw how, when used for specific purposes at specific times, this really enhanced a student's learning. Observing these teachers planted the seeds of including rote work. Through our work since then, we have come upon many exciting ideas that have made us better teachers and changed completely how we teach many concepts in order to create musically literate students who can both read music, which is visual music literacy, and also understand music orally. One of our goals as pedagogues is to begin to change mindsets from the old paradigm, where rote is a 4-letter word, to a new paradigm that highlights the best purposes and the best practices regarding rote teaching. So we're going to share with you our new paradigm for rote teaching. We have found that rote teaching is beneficial when used within specific parameters. For instance, rote teaching is for beginners. Learning to read music takes time. The music students learn to read in the beginning stages is necessarily simple sounding and easy to read. Yet young students coming to their first lesson usually have grand ideas of all the great sounding music they are going to learn to play. They have heard complex music since they were babies. Middle C and whole notes is not going to wow them. We want to harness that beginning enthusiasm by giving them interesting sounding music from the beginning. Since children are capable of understanding and playing much more complicated music than they can read, rote teaching is ideally suited for use with beginners, while we are also laying the foundation for the reading skills they need to master. Secondly, rote teaching should be based on keyboard patterns that are easy to understand and remember by beginners with no theory background. Not every piece is a good rote piece. We believe that good rote pieces need to be patterned. Teaching a piece that does not fit the definition of a good rote piece may end in frustration and disaster. Here is a good rote piece. I like bananas. I'll play you the student part. I I like bananas just like a monkey. I like bananas, yum, yum, yum. This piece looks extremely complicated on the page with its syncopated rhythm and its chromatic nature. There is no way a beginner could read this piece. And yet the keyboard pattern that it uses is actually very simple. Here's a card I use when teaching this piece. The pattern is white, black, black, white, black. Then we move up to D and play the same pattern. White, black, black, white, black, etc. So the whole piece uses the same pattern. This kind of pattern on the keyboard makes sense to beginning students. They don't need to know any letter names, just black and white. This piece has the added benefit of being adaptable to different foods and animals. So we could sing, I like bananas just like a monkey, or we could say, I like spaghetti just like a panda, and mix up the food and the animals, which is a really fun thing to do. In contrast, here is a piece from an obscure 19th century method by James Belloc. I'm going to play it for you. Do ignore the fingerings as they are the old-fashioned kind. Sorry, I missed out there. This piece would seem very simple to learn by rote to a trained musician. It has a simple melody that goes up and down, beginning and ending on do. The left hand harmonizes perfectly with the right hand based on the tonic and dominant nature of the melody. But to a child who is just beginning piano and does not know anything about tonic, dominant, seconds, thirds, note names, etc., what the child would experience in trying to learn this piece by rote is a sea of never-ending white keys, having to remember which finger comes next, if he even knows his finger numbers, how many times to play each right hand note, the order of the right hand fingers, which finger in the right hand comes with which finger in the left hand, and there is just no discernible pattern the child can hang on to, since the counterpoint only makes sense if you know something about theory. Add to this the technical complexities of playing multiple fingers in both hands, and add to this that this piece isn't exciting at all. This is a bad rote piece. It does not have patterns that are easily discernible to the beginning student.
Reviewing our new paradigm for rote teaching so far, rote teaching is, for beginners, based on keyboard patterns that are easy to understand and remember by beginners who have no theory background, and more difficult than the student's reading level. As we saw in I Like Bananas, this is much more difficult than a student can read. Instruction by rote must be paired with systematic and thorough instruction in reading notation. The students have rote pieces they learn by rote, and then they have reading pieces as a separate body of pieces where they are working on their reading skills. You would not teach a piece by rote and then have a beginning student try to read it. We use different sets of pieces to develop different skill sets. The rote pieces develop technical, musical, and oral skills, while the reading pieces develop reading skills. And now for what rote teaching is not. Rote teaching is not for advanced students for whom it would be much easier just to read the score. It is not for copying without understanding. Sorry, Noah Webster, that was part of his original definition. And rote teaching is not done using any piece. Not every piece is a good rote piece. Rote teaching is not a replacement for reading. The word rote has developed its reputation as a four-letter word because reading has often been delayed for much too long rather than being taught in conjunction with instruction in rote teaching. Because the word rote has a bad connotation, and because the pieces we teach by rote are very patterned, we are starting to refer to them as pattern pieces rather than rote pieces. Pattern pieces implies a certain type of rote teaching that uses our new paradigm.
Going back to our 4 questions about rote teaching, we've already talked about question number 1, what do we mean by rote teaching at the piano? So now let's move on to question number 2. Is poor reading the result of teaching by rote? We would answer maybe, but perhaps not. Perhaps it is a problem with the reading instruction. If a student is a poor reader, We should not say this: some students are just not good readers and there is nothing you can do about it. This is an actual quote from an actual teacher I heard. We would not say this about a school child learning to read English. Well, some kids will just not learn to read English and there's nothing you can do about it. If a student is a poor reader, we should ask these questions. First, is the system of reading instruction pedagogically sound? For example, the middle C approach to reading may work fine for some students. However, other students may get stuck in C and have difficulty breaking out to other keys. I'm sure you may have come across this problem at times. After experimenting with various ways of teaching reading, including middle C, multi-key, intervallic, and what's called eclectic, which is sort of a combination, we have come to the conclusion that the intervallic approach to reading provides the highest percentage of students that become good readers and that are confident in their reading skills. Intervallic means that they're looking at the up and down shapes and contours of melodies and reading by interval. We do, of course, teach note names after the student has learned the basics of intervallic reading. We do this in a very systematic way. Secondly, we can ask, is there enough reinforcement and repetition for each new concept? For many students, they need much more repetition for each reading concept than we might think. Only a small percentage of students learn to read effortlessly. I was one of these students. I don't know how I learned to read so easily, but I could just always do it. So when I started teaching, I was very surprised that my students were not the same way. So I've thought a lot about reading since beginning to teach. In the eclectic approach to reading, the learning process can be haphazard. A few pages of seconds and a few pages of thirds with note names tossed in before combining it all together is not enough reinforcement to master each concept. Some children end up guessing instead of really reading. Third, is the teacher convinced of the efficacy of his or her chosen method of teaching reading? We would encourage you to be convinced of your reading approach and commit to teaching it thoroughly over the long term. Starting with one system of reading for a few months and then switching to a different system may be confusing for students. And the fourth question to ask is, has it been long enough to expect fluent reading? We have found that it takes a minimum of 3 solid years of weekly work on reading before students become fluent readers. And we have also noticed over and over that there is an explosion of skill around age 8 or 9. So you might ask, why not just wait until age 9 to teach reading? This is because the foundations need to be laid and practiced over the 3 years leading up to age 9. And also, if reading is delayed so long, students might not see the reason to read, as their ears will become so much more developed than their eyes.
So let's go back to our 4 questions about rote teaching. And moving on to question number 3. Why is it assumed that we have to teach only by reading or only by rote? And we believe that we don't. The best results come from teaching a combination of pattern pieces taught by rote that develop the oral musical literacy, alongside reading pieces and sight reading cards or exercises that develop visual musical literacy. If students are only taught by rote, they may always be handicapped in their ability to read, while students who are only taught by reading may never fully develop their oral abilities and creativity. Both approaches are necessary for a student to grow as a well-rounded musician. Moving on to question 4. Are there any benefits to teaching by rote? And I'm sure you have figured out by now that yes, we believe there are many benefits. So we've identified 10 benefits of rote teaching that we would like to discuss today. The first benefit is motivation. Rote pieces sound much more exciting to beginning students than their reading pieces sound. Because of the easy to understand patterns, students can play exciting music from their very first lesson. We would like to share a piece with you called Hungry Herbie Hippo. This is a piece we typically introduce at the 2nd or 3rd lesson. And after the students learn the pattern on the black keys, as is printed here, they also learn to transpose it to 5 different keys. So we have a video of this. We're hoping that this will come across clearly for you. We're going to show you. I believe the student was 5 when he's playing this piece. So that was Hungry Herbie Hippo again, and that student continued to improvise to transpose that piece to the other keys also. The next benefit we'd like to discuss is concentration. Rote pieces are generally much longer than the typical beginner's reading piece, and they help the students develop their concentration. One piece we teach from the very first lesson is called Alphabet Boogie, and to a teacher, this piece seems very easy because it only consists of a student playing all of the white keys from the very bottom of the piano up to the top, and we add a boogie-woogie accompaniment. So I'll just play you a little so you can hear what this sounds like. The student would start at the bottom, but I'm going to start in the middle so you can hear the accompaniment. And it continues up all the way to the top of the piano. We've found that for the average 4 or 5-year-old who comes into their first lesson, it takes a great amount of concentration for them to be able to start on the very lowest A of the piano and continue up to the top without losing their concentration in the middle or without losing the rhythm of their part. So you can actually tell a lot about if a student is ready for piano actually by teaching this beginning rote piece. Another favorite rote piece that we have is I Love Coffee. We don't have a slide for it here, but some of you may be familiar with that piece. And this is composed in 6 variations. So that's another rote piece that develops concentration in the student for them to be able to memorize each variation and be able to play it straight through with the teacher's accompaniment. So moving on to the next benefit, confidence. In addition to beginners, rote teaching can be used with transfer students who are poor readers but have been playing at a much higher level than they can read. With these students, we refer to it as quasi-rote teaching because some patterns are taught by rote with reference to the score, so the student can begin to connect the patterns to what the notation looks like. For example, if a student's reading level is level 1 and their playing is level 3, having the student play only level 1 pieces until their reading catches up will probably not go over very well with the student. Instead, you could give a level 3 piece or level 2 piece that is great sounding and very patterned. I'm always looking for pattern pieces that could be taught quasi-rote. So this piece, Flamingo Dancers, has a catchy rhythm but is composed mainly with fifths, so it's very easy for the student to remember the pattern. I'll play you just a little bit. And it continues on from there. By the way, I just wanted to mention that all the pieces that we're showing you today are found in our new Pattern Pieces books. And these are available in Australia and the UK and Europe and the US as well in hard copy version, not just digital. So going back to Flamingo Dancers, assigning pieces that sound good that the student can learn right away helps the student develop confidence in both reading and playing ability, and trust in you as the teacher that you will assign great sounding music while addressing their deficiencies. Another way confidence is built is that beginning students will always have a selection of pieces that they're ready to play and perform. If they are at a family gathering, for example, and are asked by grandma to come play something for her, they'll be able to do that even if they don't have music with them.
The fourth benefit of rote teaching is keyboard orientation. Rote pieces that are composed in patterns on the groups of 2 and 3 black keys help beginners form a sense of the keyboard layout, such as in this new piece, Dandelion Fluff. I'm going to play a little bit of it for you with the accompaniment. It goes on from there. It's composed completely on the black keys, paying attention to the groups of 2 and 3 black keys. Next, pattern recognition and form is our 5th benefit of rote teaching. One piece we like to use to teach this is Martians Come to Town, which is also available in the Pattern Pieces Book 1, but I've put the sheet music version on here just for the colored picture. And we have a video of this one, so I will go ahead and get that. I think having a Martian headband really helps playing it. She thought this piece was very sneaky, obviously. On the second page, you'll see that we have the form of the piece with different colored Martians. So the green Martian part is, and then the orange Martian part is the neener, 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 nice to meet you. And I tell them that neener, neener, neener is nice to meet you in Martian language. And then the next part is the green Martian part again. And the orange part. Etc., so that they can see the form of the piece, and we can also have them call out specific Martian parts and have them play that part. This piece is based on a chromatic pattern starting on D, so it's very easy for the students to understand. The next benefit of rote teaching we'd like to talk about is rhythm. Learning 6/8 is much easier if students have had the experience of playing it and feeling the larger beat before reading it. So I'm going to play for you this Station 13 from Piano Train Trips by Juan Cabeza, who I think is actually watching our webinar right now. Hi, Juan. And you can buy his books at the Piano Safari website also. So I'm going to play this piece in 6/8. So it's very patterned, and students can start to feel the larger duple beat within the 6/8 before learning to read in 6/8. Another rhythmic piece I wanted to play is from Juan's book Diversions, book 1. This one is very patterned. It just uses the intervals of fifths, fourths, thirds, and seconds, but has a very catchy rhythm. So students are experiencing the syncopated rhythm and intervals, to practice playing different intervals. This piece really sounds difficult, but it is very easy to decode and learn to play, and very fun.
The next benefit we'd like to talk about is technique. Technical concepts are best taught by rote. We play the correct gesture or articulation, and the student imitates. When students are not distracted by the score at the first introduction of a specific technique, they can focus solely on the motions that their hands, arms, and fingers are making. So an example of a good technical etude that can be taught by rote is A Little Porcupine by Kabalevsky. And it features broken triads that shift with thumbs on adjacent keys. And Julie and I always tell our students that the thumbs are friends. They stay next to each other the whole time. So we typically teach this by rote and have students listen for their staccato articulation to be crisp and even. Play you a little bit of it. So a fun little piece there. Another piece that addresses technique is African Safari by Wendy Stevens. And this is available from her as a sheet, or we have it in Pattern Pieces Book 2. Techniques of many kinds are featured in this piece: mixed articulation, shifting over the keyboard, coordinating the hands, finger crossing, and dynamic changes. The patterns are easy to learn, however, and we teach it a section at a time. Sounds like this. And it goes on from there into another section. The next benefit is reading. So we've talked extensively about reading already, but I did want to mention it again here. At first thought, it does seem paradoxical that rote teaching can help students learn to read, but we have found this to be true. Because the student has become so adept technically at many different types of motions, the student will be able to focus solely on reading, rather than having to contend with the physical difficulties as well. A student taught only by reading, when approaching this piece, would have to figure out the reading and then figure out how to physically play it. A student who has the motions ingrained in the hands from playing many pianistic patterns by rote will decode the reading, and then his hands will automatically respond. So this piece, Shadows at Dusk, is a pattern piece that children love to play. And it continues on from there.
The ninth benefit of rote teaching is artistry. Swans on the Lake is one of the first pieces we use to start addressing artistry because many of the beginning pieces we teach are very happy and bouncy. So this is one of the first ones they encounter that's lyrical. And with my students, this is my first time introducing students to the idea of tapering the ends of phrases. So we want to make each phrase ending gentle so that we don't hurt any swans by clunking them on the head. And finally, moving on to the 10th benefit of rote teaching. This one is one of my favorites, and we did not see it coming when we first started teaching by rote. When I taught 100% by reading, my students rarely composed or improvised. Or perhaps I just never made time to hear them and let them express themselves in their lessons. When we began teaching by rote, students started coming to their lessons having found new ways to play their rote pieces. For example, one of the very first rote pieces we teach is Charlie Chipmunk. All with finger 2 on the black keys. We found that our students would come to their lessons after learning Charlie Chipmunk and say, I found a different way to play Charlie Chipmunk. And then they would play it fast, or they might play it backwards, or they might have transposed it to the white keys, or they might have done a spooky version with pedal. Or hands together in parallel motion. We found this fascinating that students would take a piece that we taught them and make it their own by doing all these creative versions. Students restricted to reading the notes only may not think that this kind of experimentation with their music is allowed. We also began to see that students would use the motions and patterns that they have in their hands that they learned in their pattern pieces in their own improvisations and compositions. I'm going to show you a very short video of a 5-year-old student who had composed this piece, and she had been playing finger 2 pieces like Charlie Chipmunk and I Like Bananas, which I showed you earlier. Let me pull that video up. She's composed several dozen pieces, but she says that that one is her favorite. The next video I'm going to show you is a duet of two of Katie's students, and they are sisters and had composed this duet at home together. And they had been working on pieces such as Sunken Treasure in Piano Safari Level 2, which is a reading piece that sounds like this. So in minor in 3/4, fast 3/4. And they had also been playing pieces like Flamingo Dancers, which we showed you earlier, which uses many fifths, blocked fifths. So you'll see in the video that they combined this idea of fast 3/4 piratey kind of sound with the fifths to create this amazing duet. So as you can see, we really feel that if you want students to improvise and compose more, teaching them by rote is one of the keys to unlocking that creativity. One more example of how this works. As a student moves into their study of scales, chord progressions, chord inversions, and various accompaniment patterns such as Alberti bass and waltz, we often see an explosion in their creativity. This is because these patterns, which were first learned by rote, are in their hands and they have the tools of music they need to compose more complex and beautiful music. After all, Beethoven, Mozart, and all the famous composers used these basic patterns in their own compositions because this is the basic stuff of music. So when students learn these patterns, we've seen them really explode in their compositional skills. So I'm going to show you a 10-year-old student who composed this piece in G minor as she had been working on her G minor scales and chords. for any reason the videos we showed were not clear on your computer, they are all available at the Piano Safari YouTube channel and also at pianosafari.com. So in that piece, she used some chord inversions and parts of her chord progression to create that great piece. Who would have thought that sometimes considered the most boring parts of piano study, scales and chords, actually would lead her to be so creative. That was such a surprise to us when we saw students doing that.
In summary, our new paradigm for rote teaching is meant to wipe out Noah Webster's definitions and replace them with a meaningful and effective approach to rote teaching at the piano. To recap, rote teaching is meant to be used with beginners. And a good rote piece is composed with memorable patterns. Not every piece makes a good rote piece. A good rote piece is used to teach elements of technique, keyboard orientation, musicality, style, rhythm, and creativity. Rote teaching should be used simultaneously with instruction and reading notation. So we believe that rote teaching is indispensable to a well-rounded musical education where students gain visual musical literacy by their reading pieces and oral musical literacy with their rote pieces. We hope that if you have not used rote teaching yet in your studio, that you will start including it in order to experience all of its benefits. And if you have questions about this presentation or you'd just like to contact us, you can find us by emailing us at info@pianosafari.com or going to our website and clicking on the contact link there. And we also have a Piano Safari teaching group on Facebook called Teaching Piano Safari, where people post lots of questions, and that's a good place to interact and just to get to know other teachers teaching by rote and using some of these techniques also.
I'm going to unscreen here
and turn it over to Sally here.
Fantastic. So much. Equally as good, and I was able to take in lots more from the MTNA conference, and I know lots of people were coming through with comments, and we've got a couple of questions, but I just wanted to say, you know, what really struck me was this idea of changing mindsets. Changing mindsets. This is kind of what we're all about, really, isn't it? It's changing the mindset from the historical view of what learning the piano is, slightly accepting and having a new paradigm. And I think that's a really exciting place to be. And I think what we're doing here with the internet and our webinar, I mean, that's helping this mindset to change, isn't it? In a way that it probably wasn't able to change even 10, 20 years ago or so. So really a very exciting thing. So as I say, we've had lots of lovely comments coming in from people. Couple of questions. Deborah's asked, how would you evaluate reading ability and playing ability? That's an interesting question. So presumably Deborah's sort of talking about maybe with a transfer student, or I don't know. Over to you two.
Well, when I get a transfer student, I have them play some pieces that they've learned, which does not really give you much information about their reading level at all. And then I'll assess their reading level through our Piano Safari sight reading cards. Even if they're playing quite complicated music, I'll start with a very easy level of those cards because I just want to see if there's any holes in their reading and where they are, and whether they're reading strictly by note name, whether they even know their note names, or whether they're reading intervallically, or whether they're guessing and they don't really know how to read at all. So then I can find which level of cards that they're in and start to build from there with sight reading cards and pieces that they can read easily, as well as some quasi-rote pieces to keep them motivated.
Okay. All right. I hope that's answered that question. Pamela's asking, do you have the pieces memorized before you teach them? I think you mean you, the teacher, don't you, Pamela?
I definitely think it's helpful because you don't want to be studying the score too much while you're introducing the piece. It's good to think through a rote piece first to make a plan for the patterns that you're going to teach and how you're going to present it. So if you don't feel too confident about that and you haven't done much teaching in this manner, we do have a teacher's guide that's a free download online for all of these pieces. So you can read through some of the sample steps we would use to introduce the piece. And that should get your thinking started too about the method that you want to use to teach the piece. Now, with that said, I occasionally have the score up on the piano for the student, but only for maybe the illustrations and the lyrics, just to give them a feel for the theme of the piece. But especially in the earliest lessons, we're not referring them to the score to learn it from notation at all.
And also we didn't mention, but we do have reminder videos online that the student can access at home, so that after we teach them a rote piece in their lesson, they can go home and watch the reminder video, which is like a mini tutorial to jog their memory if they forget how to play it when they go home.
Mm-hmm. I mean, would you say that if the teacher themselves is worried that they're going to forget, or I don't know, if it's anything like me, you know, things go in and out my head at a rate of knots, and you come to the piano and you go, how's that go? Which one is it? I don't know. You know, you'd rather them actually get the music out for themselves and use the music than not do the piece.
Yeah. Of course, you can have the music up there on the rack, but after you taught it several times, then you tend to memorize it. But
yeah. Absolutely. And it might be an idea, maybe I've got to try this, that we actually learn it, the teachers themselves, we go and learn it from the video rather than looking at the music, because don't you find that as soon as you look at the music, that's what you rely on all the time, whereas actually if we went to the videos, I'll try that out as a little experiment. I think that would be good for me, to learn one from the videos. So thank you for that, Pamela. Have we got any more questions coming in? I think Jonathan's got a question here. All right. So he says, I recently purchased the technical exercises and rote pieces to use in conjunction with my reading-based materials for young beginners. Which pieces and exercises do you introduce in the first 3 months of study?
Okay. Do you want to take that one?
Oh, okay. So Charlie Chipmunk, Lion Paw, and Alphabet Boogie I usually do in the very first lesson, along with some black key improvisation and some rhythm tap backs and things like that. King of the African Drum and Herbie Hippo I usually introduce in the second or third lesson. And then we just go on from there. By the end of 3 months, they should be able to play Swans on the Lake, Tall Giraffe, A Day in the Life of a Tall Giraffe. So they can really move pretty quickly when it comes to learning things by rote. You'll be surprised at how quickly they soak things up. Even 4 or 5 and 6 year olds soak things up so quickly. It's amazing.
Yeah. Yeah.
That book
absolutely.
Oh, sorry. That book, the Technical Exercises and Rote Pieces book, we've done a revision. So that's the new Pattern Pieces book, and the Animal Adventures book are replacing that book. So there are some newer pieces in there, along with the older or some of the other pieces that are in that original book. So if you have any questions or that's confusing, just email us and we'll explain it to you.
Yeah. And there's also a listing on our website. If you go to the page where the Pattern Pieces books are, it has a listing of everything by contents. So if you're trying to figure out how to transition between the books, you'll find that information too on the website.
Yeah, I mean, the website is just fabulous. It's got so much stuff on it. And I have to say, you know, my pupils pick up the rote pieces so very quickly. And what I loved, and I've said this to you two already, you know, that 2 years ago, 3 years ago, this was what I was finding, that playing ability can far exceed reading ability. And, you know, I look at my presentations from 2 or 3 years ago and I was saying, actually, playing music and reading music are 2 separate skills, and eventually they come together to be playing from written music. And I think the more we can all grasp that, we shouldn't be limiting our pupils' playing and their sense of wanting to be a pianist. It's how we're going to inspire them to keep learning, is if they can make beautiful sounds. I mean, swans on the lake, don't they all just adore swans on the lake? I mean, it is beautiful. And, you know, for UK based people, you might also know the work of June Armstrong. And she is another composer based in Northern Ireland, quite close to Sharon, in fact. She is another composer who has got some beautifully patterned pieces that are evocative, atmospheric, and that kids can play without the reading part of it, dragging them backwards. And if you send a pupil off with beautiful music, and if the parents as well hear this beautiful music coming out, they'll go out with smiles on their faces, and they just think it's the bee's knees, as far as I'm concerned.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So, I mean, I'm just going to say, I don't know whether there's any other questions. We're just I've got a couple of others.
Question from Amy.
Yeah.
Discussing in the teaching guide to Hungry Herbie Hippo that
it looks like I see a question about Hungry Herbie Hippo.
Yeah, and that's just coming.
And the benefit to transposing it. Just quickly, the benefit is that they are learning more about the geography of the keyboard and the white and black keys. And so they don't understand the theory behind the different keys that they're playing in, but they're just gaining a better knowledge of the keyboard and how to move around it at that point.
Great stuff. All right, lovely. I'm just going to finish off the webinar. Thank you to everybody who's come. And as I said at the beginning, Sharon is really sorry that she can't be here. But as you know, Sharon and I are co-directors of the Curious Piano Teachers. And hopefully Angie will just pop into the chat box a link, because you might know that at the moment, for the first time in 2017, the doors to the community are open. And if you're interested in coming and joining us, we'd love to see you in there. What we particularly love about the community, and Julie and Catherine are all part of the community in there, well, as we said, we're beginning to change mindsets about what learning the piano, what teaching the piano is about. It's a really safe place to be. It really is. And you feel, I know all the teachers in there feel quite nurtured and supported. We have this most fabulous, absolutely fabulous Curiosity Lounge, as it's called. And it's a Facebook group. But people have said it's a Facebook group unlike any other one, because if you've got a problem, you pop your problem in to the Facebook Curiosity Lounge, and you get a wealth of helpful, insightful, thoughtful ideas and tips coming back. Angie has just put a little a link there to our mini brochure that you can read all about our all about the enrollment that we've currently got going on. I know when I was over in America at the MTNA conference, and people were saying, well, what's so different about it? Well, I think for some of our members, you know, what they tell us is they can watch us in the morning. They can watch Sharon and I, because what you get is you get this lovely curiosity box. In fact, one went live yesterday, which is all about advanced repertoire. So this is looking at repertoire a little way on from Piano Safari, just a little way on. In the UK, we would call this grade 6 to 8. And we're looking at things like, you know, to give you a context, you're looking at things like the Bach two-part inventions, or going up to Debussy, Children's Corner, Dr. Gradus, that kind of level. And we're always trying to think of fresh ideas, fresh approaches. We're sharing knowledge. We're getting stronger because of it as a profession. So you can watch us in the morning, and then you can go off in the afternoon and put it into practice in your own teaching, see whether it works, go back and watch another video, try it out again. You get to watch videos of, for example, in the advanced repertoire, we've got Deborah Rambo-Sim, who is the digital editor of the Clavier Companion, I think it's called, in America. She's done a very special presentation for us. In the last month, Curiosity Box, we had Randall Faber from Piano Adventures. He did a special presentation for us, and we've got quite a few different people lined up to for the forthcoming months. For example, I know Forrest Kinney is going to come and do some stuff for us in November for our December Curiosity Box. It really is I feel very lucky and privileged actually to be part of the Curiosity Lounge and the Curious Piano Teachers, because we are what we say. We're a little bit curious. So it's not for everybody. You've got to want to be slightly inquiring about your own teaching. You've got to be open-minded and willing to, to try things a little differently. We'd love to see some of you in there. If you've got any questions right now about the community that you would like me to answer, I would be more than happy to try and answer this. Otherwise, you can download our brochure, and then you can drop us an email, and we'll get back to you as soon as we can. We're open right now, and we'll be open till next Monday. That's Monday, May the 8th. And in the meantime, we will be popping up all over the place on our Facebook page. So if you haven't gone over and liked our Facebook page, then please do. And then you'll get notifications. I know it's Tuesday, and I usually do a Tuesday teaching tips with Sally. But over here in the UK, it's getting on to 8 o'clock at night. And somehow, I think it's going to be Wednesday teaching tips this week, I'm afraid. But that's life. Sometimes life just takes over like that. So I'm just going to wrap up here with a final enormous thank you to Julie and to Catherine, not only for doing this presentation, but actually for taking all the time that it must have taken to put together Piano Safari, because I really do feel it is a gem. It is a gem, and the work that you do on it and the resources that you've put into it are just superb for piano teachers. So thank you both so much.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Mm-hmm.
It's our pleasure, and we know you'll be back again. Yeah. And thank you to Angie, who's there, the faceless person on my television. But are you there, Angie?
Yes, I am. Thank you very much.
Why don't you pop on and just let everybody see? Because
Hello.
there she is. There's Angie. Okay.
Oh,
Juan,
there she is.
there's Angie. So well done, Angie. Thanks very much for stepping in pretty much at the last minute. And we're just getting a few little things. One, it would be lovely. We'd love to see you in the Curious Piano Teachers. Yes, we'd be excited as well to see you in there. Oh, fabulous. And Deborah's just said, by using, oh, what a lovely way of putting it. By using rote teaching, you're giving students time to learn the language of music before learning the mechanics of the language. Thank you for saying this, Deborah, because it's one of the things I'd written down. You've put, this is exactly how children learn his or her spoken and written language. And again, that was one of the really powerful points that when we wouldn't accept from children, oh, I can't learn English. I can't learn to speak English. I can't learn to read English. I can't learn to write English. That is not accepted. And that should be the norm within piano teaching. It shouldn't be acceptable that this is the state of affairs. So fantastic, Deborah. I don't think I can say anything else to finish off with, except let's go and make all our pupils love music and be able to speak, read, write, play the language of music. Thank you all so much. Happy teaching if you're going off to do it today. Bye for now.
Bye.
Bye.